The rope creaked in the wind as soldiers formed a ring in the orchard. Boots scraped dirt, muskets glinted, and a young officer stood straight with his hands tied and his coat dusty from the road. Nathan Hale looked calm. He was 21, tall and spare, a schoolteacher turned captain, a man raised on scripture and discipline. The noose brushed his shoulder. A British provost read the charge in a clipped voice, spying in civilian dress within His Majesty's lines. Sentence of death by hanging. Hale asked for no mercy. He asked only to meet the end like a soldier and to be remembered for the cause that brought him here. The road that brought him there began far from New York. Nathan was born in Coventry, Connecticut in 1755, the sixth son in a large farming family. His parents prized learning and duty. He and his brother Enoch went to Yale at 14. He studied Latin and mathematics, tutored younger students, read sermons and plays, and wrote to friends about virtue as if it were a muscle you strengthened by use. After graduation, he taught school in New London. His letters from that time were steady and plain. He wanted a life of usefulness more than a life of comfort. When war came, he did not hesitate. He drilled a militia company and then accepted a commission in the Continental Army. The work of a young officer was not glorious. He marched men who had brought their own muskets, counted powder, solicited shirts, and traded for shoes. He also saw the scale of the fight and the need for resolve. Under Washington, an army without money or uniforms learned to live under order. In March 1776, the British left Boston. Celebration lasted only days before everyone understood that the next blow would fall on New York, the key to the harbor and the Hudson. Summer on Long Island turned into defeat. The British landed with veterans from Europe and Hessian regiments, pushing the Continentals back through woods and marshes. Washington's army, cut and shaken, slipped at night from Brooklyn Heights across the East River to Manhattan, oars muffled, lanterns hooded, silence enforced by fear. The city was about to become the British base for the rest of the war. Washington had to know where the enemy would move next, or risk losing the army outright. He asked for a man to cross the lines in disguise and bring back facts, numbers, positions, intentions. Few volunteered. A captured spy would hang. Hale stepped forward and gave his reasons, simply. Someone had to do it. He could pass as a schoolmaster. He knew the ground. He believed the cause needed information more than it needed his sword. He left his company at Harlem Heights in early September and crossed to Long Island dressed as a teacher looking for work. In taverns and farmyards, he listened for talk about landings and roads. He walked the shore, counting ships and guns. He sketched redoubts in a pocket notebook and made lists of regiments and commanders. He hid the papers in his shoes and turned back toward the city. The accounts of his capture disagree in detail, but agree in outcome. One story says a loyalist recognized him at a ferry and tipped off a British patrol. Another says he was lured by a man posing as a patriot, Major Robert Rogers, famed ranger now on the king's side, who gained his confidence and demanded to see his papers. Hale, proud and earnest, trusted too easily and spoke too freely. He was seized near Flushing, searched, and the sketches were found. Brought to General William Howe's headquarters, he admitted he was an American officer on a spy mission. The law of armies left no room for pity. He was ordered to die at dawn. He was held that night near the Beekman House, watched by guards who were not inclined to kindness. He asked again for a Bible and was refused. He wrote letters, one to his mother, one to his commander, offering affection and asking that his debts be settled. The British provost, anxious that rebel papers not become patriotic relics, destroyed them. A chaplain later said, Hale spoke softly of regret, only for the one life he had to give. If the stories of those hours vary, they meet in the same portrait. A young man resolved, not loud, not theatrical, sure of the cause he served. New York burned while he waited. On the night of September 21st, flames ran through lower Manhattan, lighting the sky. Rumor made quick work of the facts. Some blamed British torches, others accused American saboteurs. The next morning, September 22nd, 1776, a gallows was set up in an orchard near the Dove Tavern. A small crowd gathered, soldiers, laborers, loyal citizens curious to see justice done. Hale was brought forward, hands tied with cord. He was allowed a final word. He used it to place himself back into the purpose that had carried him across the lines. He regretted only that he had but one life to lose for his country. The mechanics of hanging were crude. There was no measured drop to break the neck. The victim strangled. Witnesses said his body twitched for minutes, then stilled. The British meant it as a lesson. This is the price of spying. But lessons like that have a way of turning into monuments. The story of his poise ran through the camps and then through newspapers. In defeat, men reached for examples that said their losses had meaning. Hale's name began to do that work. Washington mourned the waste of a promising officer. He also learned, if the army was to survive, intelligence had to be gathered by people trained to seem ordinary. Over the next years, he built networks of couriers and code names, the Culper Ring on Long Island, merchants and farmers who carried news folded into buttons or written in sympathetic ink. They were careful where Hale had been bold. Their success helped reverse the tide in later campaigns, and the young captain's fate remained the quiet spark that lit better tradecraft. Hale's afterlife grew layer by layer. When peace came, Connecticut towns raised stones to him. Yale set a statue in bronze, his face clear and his hands bound behind his back. Orators quoted his last line at July celebrations. School readers included his story, presenting him as the clean, upright martyr of the founding generation. The British officer who burned his letters could not prevent the growth of a legend. He only ensured that the legend would rely on memory and repetition, which can be stronger than paper. It is easy to sand a real person smooth. The truth that survives is simpler and therefore larger. Hale was no superhuman. He was a devout, educated young man with a sense of duty, a temper that flared in letters when honor was questioned, and a willingness to stake his life on an idea. He was brave enough to accept a mission he did not know how to do well, and brave enough to meet the consequence when it failed. The revolution had many soldiers like him whose names we do not know. His was chosen by the accident of a phrase and the timing of a hard year. Walk the streets where he died, and there is no orchard now. Apartment towers stand where the gallows stood, and traffic hums over ground that once held a quiet crowd watching a rope tighten in morning light. Yet the sentence remains, repeated whenever people reach for the cost of a cause, the regret of only one life. It is not bloodlust. It is the opposite, the sober recognition that freedom asks for things we would rather not give, and that sometimes a single life is all a person owns to offer. Nathan Hale did not live to see the flag he served survive that first bad year. He did not see Trenton or Saratoga or Yorktown. He left no memoir and no children. What he left was the example of a calm voice at the end, a life aligned with belief, and a reminder that courage is often quiet. His gallows was meant to frighten men away from the struggle. It sent others toward it. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.